I realized early on that it is detailed scientific knowledge which makes certain religious beliefs untenable. A knowledge of the true age of the earth and of the fossil record makes it impossible for any balanced intellect to believe in the literal truth of every part of the Bible in the way that fundamentalists do. Why should any of the rest of it be accepted automatically? What could be more foolish than to base one's entire view of life on ideas that, however plausible at that time, now appear to be quite erroneous? And what would be more important than to find our true place in the universe by removing one by one these unfortunate vestiges of earlier beliefs? Those are the words of Francis Crick, Sir Francis Crick. What mad pursuit! A personal view of scientific discovery of 1988. And Francis Crick was born June 8th in 1916. And this is Atheist History Week. And I'm John Rafferty, president of the Secular Humanist Society of New York and a proud and active member of New York City Atheists, which produces this show. Each week at this time, we look at the week's anniversaries in the history of free thought, of atheism, of skepticism, rationalism, whatever you have. We discuss notable people like Francis Crick, the famous and the not so, who were born or died or achieved something significant in regards to free thought during this calendar week. And we look at significant events that took place this week in history. Court cases, publishing events, religious riots, burnings at the stake, and other faith-based fun and games. It's the second week of June, and we have started this evening already, with Francis Crick. Who, as I mentioned, was born June 8th in 1916 in England, and he and his science partner, James Watson, in 1951 started working together, and in 1953 discovered and revealed to the world the double helix structure for DNA. In 1962, he and Watson and Maurice Wilkins won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for determining the structure and replication scheme of DNA. Even as a boy, he said, I was a skeptic and agnostic with a strong inclination toward atheism. And what Francis Crick has done for atheism and free thought is that self-same discovery of the structure of DNA. Why? Because learning how DNA replicates in the human body or in any living creature enabled science then to start mapping out our genetic structures, which allowed us to understand how we are related to the rest of the world's fauna. We and the chimpanzees are 98% identical. We are over 50% identical with so many other creatures that we would not even think of, turtles and dogs and whooping cranes. This made it possible for science to actually point to the claim with scientific certitude that we are not a special creation of God's, that God didn't create us out of a pile of dust in the Garden of Eden and create the other half of the human race out of a rib from the first half of the human race, but that that the beasts of the field and the flowers of the field and the people who till the fields and enjoy the fields, all of us, we're all related. We are not a special creation of God or anything else. The discovery of the double helix structure of DNA and learning how DNA replicates throughout throughout all of the flora and fauna of the world, one of the major advances in science and in free thought. In a jump from one field of activity to another that I think he would have appreciated, let's talk about Cole Porter. Born June 9th, 1891. And my favorite popular songwriter of all time. Porter was born in Peru, as they pronounce it, Peru, Indiana, and was an early piano player, songwriter, wrote his first song at the age of 10, went off to Yale, where he attracted national attention for even while he was in college for the songs he wrote there. And for those of you who are not familiar with, nevertheless you are familiar with his songs, you can't get away from them. Songs like I Get a Kick Out of You, You're the Top, Begin the Begin, Anything Goes, Night and Day, I've Got You Under My Skin, You Do Something to Me, In the Still of the Night, You'd Be So Nice to Come Home To, and all of you. I mean, so many others, and huge Broadway hits, including Kiss Me Kate, Can Can, Silk Stockings, High Society, movies. He, as a woman who briefly dated him, Porter was gay and made no bones about it. Within New York and theatrical society, everybody knew he was, even though he was married to a woman and who they both loved each other very much, but his sexual preference was men. But early on, a woman who briefly dated him recalled him as one of the most irreverent persons I've ever encountered, but so charming. Which is the same thing that could be said about his songs. Irreverent and charming. He lived a lavish and gay lifestyle, but he engaged, because of the lyrics of his song, in a lifelong battle with Puritans and censorship. They're not outright atheist screeds, but things like, why do gods above me, who must be in the know, think so little of me, they allow you to go. It's always gods, by the way. It's never God. Many of his lyrics refer to the gods in a kind of an offhand way. Finally, as he came to the end of his life, he had had a terrible horseback riding accident, which just about crippled him. He underwent literally dozens of operations over the last 10 or 15 years of his life. And when he was admitted to the hospital for the last time, terribly ill and miserable, his friend Bobby Raisin overheard an encounter between Cole Porter and the staff at the hospital. When they were admitting him, they asked him his religion, and Cole Porter replied, "Put down none." And the clerk asked, "Protestant?" And Cole said again, "Put down none." One of his lyrics, not so well known, but called "Live and Let Live" from Can Can, reads or sings, and I can't sing, so I will read. Live and let live, be and let be, hear and let hear, see and let see. Sing and let sing, dance and let dance, live and let live, and remember this line, Your business is your business, and my business is mine. Not a bad philosophy of life. Cole Porter, born June 9th in 1891, and died in 1964. Unfortunately, he probably would have added even more to our American songbook. Some of the wittiest and funniest lyrics in the American songbook. Roughly contemporaneous, Joseph Lewis was born on June 11th in 1889. And he was hugely successful as an atheist writer, publisher, instructor, litigator. But if anybody could be, if any contemporary American could be compared to Don Quixote tilting at windmills, it would probably be Joseph Lewis. But he never stopped. He won a lot and he lost a lot, and he kept fighting. He was born in 1889 in Montgomery, Alabama. Left school at age 9. Self-educated himself by reading Robert Ingersoll and Thomas Paine, his lifelong idol. He moved to New York City in 1920, became president of the Freethinkers of America, a position he held the rest of his life. He started his own publishing house, which is still going strong, thank you very much, the Free Thought Press Association. And his many books include The Tyranny of God, Lincoln the Free Thinker, Jefferson the Free Thinker, The Bible Unmasked, Franklin the Free Thinker, Burbank the Infidel, that's Luther Burbank, the botanist whom we discussed earlier in this series of programs. Atheism, a collection of his public addresses. Voltaire, the incomparable infidel. The Bible in the Public Schools. Should children receive religious instruction? The Ten Commandments, which weighed in at a hefty 644 pages. And Thomas Paine, author of the Declaration of Independence. One of Lewis's campaigns in his life was to prove that Thomas Paine was really the author of the Declaration of Independence. Well, his book, An Atheist Manifesto, in 1954, was a major free thought publication, and his publishing house and his work, he kept specializing in books written by medical authorities for the general public on matters such as contraceptives, birth control. One of the things he also got himself all tied up in knots about was circumcision. He was against. And got himself carried away with that one. He campaigned for the erection of statues to Thomas Paine. He, in various places, including in France and in Marsden, in Paine's birthplace in Thetford in England. Lewis fought many court cases to protect the separation of church and state. He tried to collect punitive damages from the state of New York and from New York's Trinity Church, when Trinity Church put up a plaque with a bogus George Washington prayer. George Washington didn't pray. He lost. He was one of the major protesters against the addition of "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance in 1954, and that same year that the post office started, no, in 1960, I guess, or thereabouts, when the post office started issuing Christmas stamps. Atheism, he wrote, rises above creeds and puts humanity upon one plane. There can be no chosen people in the atheist philosophy. There are no bended knees in atheism, no supplications, no prayers, no sacrificial redemptions, no divine revelations, no washing in the blood of the Lamb, no crusades, no massacres, no holy wars, no heaven, no hell, no purgatory, no silly rewards, and no vindictive punishments, no Christs and no saviors, no devils, no ghosts, and no gods. That's part of an address on atheism delivered at a symposium at the Community Church in New York on April 20th in 1930. Joseph Lewis, born June 11th in 1889, who lived until 1968. On June 12th in 1802, Harriet Martineau was born in England, the sixth of 8 children of a silk manufacturer. And she rebelled against her family's Christian brand of Unitarianism, the kind that admonished children and servants to obey their masters in everything. She was devout as a teenager, but as an adult, she rejected Unitarianism. "I disclaim your theology in toto," she wrote. She became a writer, a feminist, and made quite a name for herself as one of the first women to support herself and her family with her nonfiction, writing 50 books and more than 1,600 articles signed in her own name. In her own memoirs, she boasted of being, quote, "probably the happiest single woman in England." She wrote a 2-volume Society in America. Remember, this is an English woman. And she came here, and her publication and the tasks she set herself was compared to de Tocqueville's Study of America and his famous 2 volumes, or is it 3 volumes, Democracy in America. In her 2-volume Society in America was a pretty definitive work on the status of American women, whom she found unhealthily obsessed with religion. She was a very, very good observer of the society she was studying, so good that her scientific methods of observation caused many people to call her the first sociologist. She also wrote a tribute to the slave insurrection leader Toussaint Louverture of Haiti, and after visiting the Mideast, she wrote an examination of the genealogy of Egyptian, Hebrew, Christian, and Mohammedan religions. The woman was busy. In 1848, wanting to offer children an alternative to what she called pernicious superstition, Harriet Martineau wrote Household Education as a secular guide to parents. And while she was at it, the next thing she did was she translated and condensed the 6 volumes of French atheist philosopher Auguste Comte into 2 volumes with his approval. In 1855, her doctor told her she had a fatal heart disease. The doctor didn't know what he was talking about. She figured she was going to die, so she wrote her autobiography. And she recorded that believers swamped her with self-righteous, as she called it, self-righteous religious propaganda, including many of them who sent her the New Testament, as she said, as if I'd never seen one before. The lesson taught us by these kindly commentators on my present experience, she wrote, is that dogmatic faith compels the best minds and hearts to narrowness and insolence. When she died, Florence Nightingale, another icon of feminism, wrote that Harriet Martineau was born to be a destroyer of slavery in whatever form, in whatever place, all over the world, wherever she saw or thought she saw it. Harriet Martineau, born June 12th in 1802. And in spite of the doctor's diagnosis in 1855, she lived to 1876 and accomplished a whole lot. Another accomplished woman, this one of the 20th century, is Margaret Bourke White. The photographer, who was born June 14th. Probably one of the most interesting lives led in the 20th century. Her parents had been married by Felix Adler, the founder of Ethical Culture, and her mother, Minnie, was a progressive feminist and very definitely a very ardent atheist, who told Margaret, this is, I think, charming, she said, "You were invited into the world," meaning she was a planned child. She and her husband had decided to have a child. You were invited into the world. What a lovely phrase. Her father was an amateur inventor, and when Margaret showed an interest as a child in snakes, he encouraged it, and she graduated from Cornell in 1927 with a degree in herpetology, the study of reptiles. But her fame was her photography, and even early on she took wonderful photographs, and Henry Luce talked her into becoming a staff photographer for a little startup thing called Time magazine. Probably no one was more influential in the success of Time magazine than Margaret Bourke White, who became the most famous news photographer of her time. Not just the most famous woman news photographer, famous news photographer of the time. In 1930, she talked the Soviet authorities into letting her travel around, all around the Soviet Union, filming whatever she saw. And then Henry Luce brought out Life magazine in the mid-30s, and she photographed so many searing images of the Depression all over America, and went wherever the news stories were. She was married twice briefly, but when the Second World War began, she became the first major female war correspondent covering the invasion of Russia by the Nazis, traveling to North Africa in an American convoy, which was torpedoed, but she survived. She documented the war in the Pacific, the liberation of Italy, and the liberation of the Nazi death camps. She met Gandhi several times, and took the last famous photograph of him spinning at his spinning wheel just hours before he was assassinated. Her unforgettable photographs of South Africa informed the world about the injustices of apartheid. She had Parkinson's disease, which made a problem of her last years of her life, and but her books remain. She was brought up as a non-believer, and she remained a non-believer all her life. This has been Atheist History Week for the second week in June, and I'm delighted you've been able to be with us. I'm John Rafferty, representing both New York City Atheists and the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and I hope you'll join us again next week at the same time and in the same place, when we'll move ahead to the next week, the third week of June, in atheist history. Thank you.
Where we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation, and a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers.